Hi, my name's Barb Oakley, and I'm so glad to be here at Jagiellonian University in order to help you get a little bit better sense of how to teach well online. And I'd like to begin by kind of introducing you to how not to teach online. So what I want you to do is I want you to watch the following minute and a half or so video snippet showing a professor who's actually pretty close to a typical professor from an online university who's teaching an introductory course. And what I want you to do is I want you to look and make a few notes to yourself. What are the things you notice that this professor is actually doing wrong as he's teaching an introductory course about photosynthesis? So let's go.
My lecture today will give you an introduction to photosynthesis. Look at the panel on the right, I mean your left. You see that photosynthesis changes sunlight into chemical energy, splits water to liberate O2, and fixes CO2 into sugar. In plants and algae, photosynthesis takes place in the organelles called chloroplasts. You see a chloroplast on the right. Let's go deeper and look at the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis at the thylakoid membrane. The flow of electrons down the electron transport chain leads to the ultimate reduction of NADP to NADPH. In conclusion, you can note all of the following ideas. This should give you a good overview of this vitally important process.
Okay, so I'm beginning to see some comments in. If you can add more comments, look at Jakob is saying too much information on the slides, going through them too quickly. Anna says it's too fast, too many elements. Oh, Dagmara says no voice intonation, flat intonation. So it says Isabella, boring voice. Yeah. So too much information provided on graphs without any real explanation. He's going to fall asleep soon. So I should, these are wonderful comments. So the professor seems bored to death himself. Sorry, Barbara. So I should say that this professor, the bad professor, is actually my husband, modeling what really bad teaching online can look like. And again, this is modeled after a real life video. And you're pointing out the things, the most important things that are that are not only wrong in this video, but are frequently wrong in many videos. So, for example, there's a lot of information put on all at once on the screen. And many of you are pointing out how bored he sounds. Actually, it took a number of takes because he was sounding too excited initially, and the real professor sounded even more bored than he was. The reality is, when you are teaching online, you are actually like losing a few charisma points through the camera. So when if you're very enthusiastic, you will still come through as very enthusiastic. But if you're bored, you will seem even more bored when you're teaching online. So your facial expressions and your own enthusiasm, and notice my hand motions, those are all very important. In fact, you can see that you do not see the bad professor's hand motions. And as it turns out, your hand motions, your gesticulations are mirrored within the brain of your students, and that helps them to understand things. So I can't even begin to emphasize the importance of good online teaching. And this often what we see in online courses is really nothing like as good online teaching could be. So I do want to point out in the real video this is based on, believe it or not, the teacher was actually standing in front of his closing points. He was also rocking back and forth like this, much more than my husband was. So it almost made you seasick. Notice the clothing that he's wearing, kind of really ragtag. And not only is his voice monotonous, but it's a mumble. So if you do not speak English as your first language, it can be really difficult to understand what he's saying. So all of these things are important points to kind of keep in mind as you're presenting, but we'll give you a little bit more theory to better understand some of these ideas later on. So I think that what's important to understand is actually, I teach at Oakland University in Michigan, and most people think Michigan is this kind of not a, or Oakland at least, isn't a place in California that's nice and sunny, but actually Oakland in Michigan is very snowy. So that's me going to work at my typical day job. And this is my co-instructor in teaching the course Learning How to Learn, Terry Sanowski. He's out of San Diego. So this is Terry as he's standing around his usual day job near the Salk Institute. So one of the great things about teaching online is that you can have not only students get together from very different places, but you can have professors coming from very different locations as well. And to my surprise, I was invited to speak at Harvard. I was a nervous wreck. I mean, it's Harvard. I walked into the room and it was packed, standing room only. And I thought, why are there so many people here? It turns out that our one little course made for a few $1,000s, mostly in our basement. And you can see our basement right here it had on the order of the same number of students as all of Harvard's online courses put together, made for millions of dollars with hundreds of people. So what this tells you is that it is very possible to do really good online courses for virtually no money at all, and to do courses that are as good or even better than the courses that are taught by some of the world's leading universities. So what is behind great courses? Well, obviously cheerful, friendly instructors. And keep in mind that in face-to-face teaching, as in online teaching, half of all teaching is below average. The great thing about online, though, is that people can focus in more broadly from around Poland, from around the world, to find really good teachers when you are online. The world of academia has always put great emphasis on impact. And that's why we've often said, oh, well, researchers who make a great impact should be highly respected at their institutions. And they receive a lot of extra attention when they do have good research that does have impact. But we're moving into a new era now where impact is possible to make even when you are teaching, and that is via online mechanisms. Terry Sanowski has something like 300,000 or more citations. He's one of the most cited researchers. But as he has mentioned to me, actually, our course together has had more impact than any of his research papers. So you too can make great impact through online teaching. And so if you use metaphor and imagery and pay attention to motion. So even in this talk, pay attention to how I'm making use of motion. And even if you're just making videos in your home, videotaping your screencast, you can do some magical things with your videos that you can't do in class, or if you're doing live, sort of live on-screen teaching. So I personally really love asynchronous teaching, making videos. And as you'll see, this can be a wonderful way to teach well online. But I'll also give you tips for synchronous teaching online as well. A little bit of humor. Keep in mind, a little bit of humor sprinkled here and there throughout what you're teaching can actually be a very effective way to make your course more attractive for students. In the past, teachers have often said, well, my job is not to entertain. But the reality is, we are now in a new era where we have to make courses that are not only insightful, but also intriguing, that help capture attentions, because we're competing with many, many other sort of ways that a student could be sending or spending their attention. So the foundation of all teaching online is you as a teacher. And so what does this really mean? The best way for me to convey this idea is it's, in theory, it is called something called the familiarity principle. When students see your smiling face online over and over and over again, they acquire the same familiarity with you that they do if you were in a regular classroom. And so showing your face when you are doing online courses is actually quite important. Have you ever met someone who you liked on television? And when you meet them, it's like a television star or even a movie star, you feel as if you already know them, even though they don't know who you are. There's a little of that going on in online teaching. When you show yourself, your face, show yourself over and over again, people become familiar with you. They seem to know you, and they actually learn to like you and what you're teaching better. So to step back just a minute, I want to give you just a very quick 1-minute overview of the history of online teaching. MIT started things out with their MIT OpenCourseWare. And with this, they were videotaping professors in classrooms. And as you can see by looking at the professor here, his back is to the camera. He's writing on the board. It's very slow. And so it's pretty tough to get too enthusiastic no matter what is being taught. So then the idea became, well, let's show the instructor's face and have the information come up beside them. And I call this death by bullets. It's kind of, it can get boring very fast, very predictable. Sometimes they'll put in a picture, but the picture is disconnected from the person. So much as I'm forced to do right now because I'm teaching this in a synchronous manner live. And so this can be a problematic way of presenting the information as well. Then there's what I call the bookcase in the background syndrome, which I am exemplifying right here. If I'd been given a nickel for every person who has come up and said, I have to teach an online course and I want to have something really looking very nice in the background, different, that shows my intellect. And how about a bookcase? Do you think of bookcases? Everybody puts bookcases. So just be aware, is that what you want to convey? Or is the busyness perhaps something that you'd rather not convey? Whatever is in your background is really going to tell a little bit of a story about you. One thing to be aware of is of online experts, that is, people who are experts on the online world. I know one such expert who's with a top university in the world, and he speaks broadly about the problems of teaching online. And I've seen him give a 45-minute presentation where he talks about these problems. And the entire time he's teaching, he has a picture of his book beside him. So that's all that's going on. You see his head and his book. Is this good online teaching? Is he himself perhaps biased against online teaching because he doesn't know how to do it well himself? And so his experiences, although quite real, have always been bad because, frankly, he's a bad online teacher. So you'll often hear this bias from the academic world against teaching online. And part of it is simply because all of us are a little bit nervous about, what's going to happen to our professions and to the need for our own teaching. But think about this from a student's perspective. We want our students to have the best of teaching. And so you want to be amongst those really fantastic teachers that go viral, that are really valued for the fact that they can convey information online in a way that people can easily get. One thing I do have to say is I have often been told by top teachers that metaphor is the best way they've found to help communicate really difficult ideas effectively. And people who've told me that have often said, well, I don't tell the other professors that metaphor is actually valuable because they make fun of me when I do this. And I couldn't understand how that could be the case, except that they then explained, when I tell them I use metaphor, they say, that's why you're so popular as a teacher. You make it all easy for them. But that's what we're supposed to be doing as teachers, is onboarding students in the easiest way we can to the very difficult material they often have to face. We do not have students trapped in a classroom when we're teaching online. So we've been spoiled. We teach in a classroom, students are not going to get bored and like get up and walk out. I mean, usually that's not what's going to happen. You can kind of drag them through anything. But online, they can easily turn you off and go to something else. So you need to have mechanisms for teaching online that are actually different than how you teach for a classroom. Just keep in mind that when textbooks first came out, when books came out, the initial reaction was, oh, they won't need us as teachers anymore. So people were really, they were very much against the publication of books. And now, of course, people recognize that books are a great complement for teaching. It's similar for teaching online. Teaching online is a great complement for any kind of teaching, but it also can be a good replacement. So keep that in mind. You need to lift your face-to-face teaching, and you want to also move into the online world even more, perhaps, than you are right now. So what are some of the rules of making online courses? There's what I call the zero-width rule. Like below even the first rule is the zero-width rule of online courses. And that is to simply make a video. And don't even make a good video, make a bad video. So making videos, even if they're bad, is a really good way to help your students because you can place materials online that they can access, for example, if they're sick or if you happen to be out of town that week or whatever. So getting used to making videos is a great approach to have when you're going into the online. The first rule, so it's above the zero-width rule, is to make engaging online courses. And that means often making engaging videos. Unfortunately, what I often see, or not often, but sometimes, even again from top universities, is they'll do things like this. They'll throw a bunch of documents online, Maybe have a little bit of interview, because interviews are really easy to do. And then they'll call that an online course. This is not good online teaching. This is just something that anybody can do. Anybody can throw documents online. You want to create videos that convey some of that key essence of you as a teacher that you convey in a regular classroom, and you want to be conveying that online. What can happen are things like this. So one thing I often say is to make things cheaply, feel free to enlist your family members, because they will work for food. And this is a video actually of our daughter, Rosie, who I needed someone to model like putting on headphones in order to block out sound. So she had a bad pair of headphones. So she happened to have a large set of headphones on her lap, and she was willing to look kind of dorky and silly for the camera. And she modeled in the course learning how to learn how you block out sound in order to focus more effectively. So her video went into the course about 3 months after the course came out. She was sitting with her medical school class being taught by a preeminent cardiologist in Southeast Michigan. And he was teaching away. There's 75 students in the class, and he suddenly stopped the class, pointed right at her, and said, You were the girl in the MOOC, the massive open online course. So here's this professional who had nothing to do with me or with, or even knowing that she would appear in the video. And he was watching that course because he was getting a lot out of it. So you too can create courses where people will suddenly recognize what you've done from out of nowhere. So it can be, they may recognize you from the university and the campus, or from here in Krakow, or from Poland, or even beyond. So it's absolutely amazing the outreach that you can have as an online teacher, a good online teacher, especially if you are making materials that are broadly useful for people. Or I should say, so my co-instructor, Terry Sanowski, he was, when we first thought about making a MOOC, he had first considered it and thought, no, I don't think I want to do that. He's a very busy man. He's, one of the key leaders on artificial intelligence. But he was at a conference, and he was sitting with a friend, and this friend came up to, people kept coming up to his friend and saying, oh, it's you. Can I have a picture with you? Can I have a selfie? Can I have your autograph? So Terry asked, well, what's this about? And his friend said, well, I did this thing called a MOOC, a massive open online course. And that's when Terry realized that it's not only valuable broadly to create a good quality online course, but it also helps within your specialization to help people become or begin to recognize what you're doing, what you're teaching, and really the value of your own expertise. So again, teaching online is valuable not only for your students, but also for your professional career. So I want to give you a little sense now. Let's move to Terry, and I'll let him speak for us. This is a little video from our massive open online course on teaching online, and it talks about mirroring and motivation. So mirroring is the idea that whatever's going on in your brain is actually echoed in the brain of your students. So here we go.
In week 2 of our course, we describe what neuroscience at the movies expert Jeff Zaks has dubbed the mirror rule. This is when the whole brain becomes involved in subtly mimicking what we see others doing. It's almost like a dance team on one side of the stage that watches and mimics the motions of the dancers on the other side. As we saw with gestures, this mirrored neural activation can help us access our neural schemas for understanding the world. For our purposes, a particularly important aspect of the mirror rule is when we mimic facial expressions. Facial expressions seem to be particularly good at tapping into the network of neurons involving our emotions.
Now, sometimes people will say, live classes are always going to be better because I have an audience that we resonate and we react to one another. And this is true, but at the same time, keep in mind that actors and actresses have to get up in front of cameras all the time and portray emotions. So it's just a different skill set when you're, providing your emotions and enthusiasm to the camera than it is when you're face to face in a classroom. If you've got a fair bit of experience in front of the classroom, you can anticipate what that result, what their thoughts are going to be, and so it can help you in shaping how you are sharing your emotions. But I'd like to bring to mind the idea of injections of Botox. So you might think, what do injections of Botox have to do with, me teaching well? What they found was when they injected Botox, what they do is they inject it right around wrinkles, and it relaxes the muscles there and helps it so that you don't wrinkle, and most of those wrinkles are actually related to your frowning. So by injecting this paralyzing drug right near those muscles that allow you to frown, you don't have as many wrinkles showing. But they found something odd that happened to people who had these Botox injections. They seemed happier. And they wondered, well, why would they be happier? Is there something in the Botox itself that acts as an antidepressant? Well, as they researched more fully, they found something quite interesting. How you feel, we often think that we're sad, and so it shows in our face. But in part, it goes the other way as well. If our face is frowning, it makes us feel sad. And when you can't frown as easily, you are less sad. You actually start to feel better. So, so even when they've done experiments with pencils, you take a pencil, you put it so that it's right between your teeth, and it causes you to have kind of a bit of a smile. And they found people actually get happier when their face is forced into a smiling and happy expression. So you may have found yourself that you're going to go teach something that day, and you're just tired, and you really, you don't want to be, but you're going to give it your best. So you go in front of your class and you get yourself all happy as much as you can. And then after class, somehow you feel better. Well, part of it is because you have reflected within yourself the feelings that are showing on your face, and it makes you feel happier. But think of what's happening with those mirror neurons within your students. Your own excitement, your own happiness actually helps them become more excited and more happy with whatever you're teaching. Think to the professors who were your favorite professors over the years. Often they were people who were really excited and enthusiastic about whatever they were sharing about. And so it's important, actually, if we're trying to help students tweak their mental framework, we can't go in with a ladder and tweak their neural connections, much as we might like to. But we can indirectly do it by having excitement in our expressions that is mirrored within our students, And then that can help them in turn to become more motivated and excited about whatever they're learning. So one thing that I'd like to share is just the idea of mental frameworks. You actually, all those little dots that I'm showing on the screen, those represent neurons, and lines represent connections between them. So what are the birds? Birds are your temporary thoughts that you are going to put into that long-term memory schema. So when you, as a teacher, are teaching something, what you're really doing is helping students form thoughts that they can in turn put in and use to change and improve their mental schema of expertise on that topic. So let's say you're a teacher and you're teaching away. So what's actually happening is you have a thought. Part of it is actually informed by thoughts that you've pulled from your long-term memory, and you have a mental model. And that mental model is what you are trying to share with your students. So when you are both in neural sync in the same locations in your brain, roughly, it turns out that means you've actually taught the student. The student has successfully learned what you've tried to communicate. So in order to do this kind of teaching and sharing, it's important for you to use your face, use your hands, use your voice, and use imagery to help students to form mental models, also get those mental models evoked from their own long-term memory. And when they've got those mental models appropriately in mind, you've actually taught the student the key concept, which is in that mental model you're trying to convey. So I do want to bring up so there's a fellow named Guy Fieri who looks a little bit inebriated in this image, but on the other hand, that's kind of Guy Fieri. He's a very excited guy. He's a master chef who likes to travel around the United States, and he finds very rural restaurants, so restaurants way out, outside of cities and so forth. And what he's trying to do is help these very rural restaurants to get a little bit of attention. And he goes to these restaurants and he shows kind of how they're cooking and the interesting things they're doing. And what Guy Fieri does, he normally goes to a restaurant that they are going to film 2 times. He goes there 2 weeks before they're going to film, and he meets with the staff and they talk, and he's a perfectly normal guy. And, very casual voice, but then 2 weeks later, he comes back to go on camera as they're filming. And when he does that, he has a completely bigger than life persona. He changes because he needs to be excited for the camera, because remember, that camera will pull away about 10 charisma points. So indeed, the Guy Fieri he's such an excited and happy guy when he's on camera that you can't help but kind of get excited and happy with him. Our students have enough really boring, dreadful things going on in their lives. When we are meeting with them to help teach, especially to teach online, we want to be excited and upbeat and try to communicate some of that excitement, because that will get them more excited about what you're teaching. And keep in mind that familiarity principle. So it's just remember, when you show your face teaching online, it helps students to become more familiar and just happier with what you're doing. Now, you might be familiar with there's a fellow named Sal Khan who does something called Khan Academy. And Khan Academy, at least in the US and actually in many countries around the world, what he will do, and he's a wonderful explainer. So he will show videos where he's explaining things, and people love it because he gives great explanations. So you might say, well, but wait a minute. He shows a video where his hand is writing things down, but they don't show his face. So why do I need to show my face? Here's the difference. People go to Sal's videos because they really want to learn what he's teaching. For example, our daughter was struggling when she was taking the statistics in college. So she went to Salman Khan's videos and they explained them to her, and she became a total fan. But she was already motivated to learn that subject. So she went to his videos because she was already motivated. He doesn't need to worry about being expressive, about trying to motivate his students because they're already motivated to come to his website. Are all of your students highly motivated to be in your class and learn your material? If they are, then you don't need to show your face. But if they're not, it's a good idea to show that smiling face and to help. I mean, would you ever want to take a face-to-face classroom where there was just a disembodied voice coming out of loudspeakers and they showed a PowerPoint? No, you like that, that the teacher really helps to lead you through the material. And you want that to be also taking place when you're teaching your classes online. So I want to give you just a few tips here related to what do you do if you are teaching live. So you're synchronous, you're live. Now, there's actually some common mistakes that people make. I'm very lucky because I wish you could see around me the wonderful setup that they have devised for me here so that you can see my hands. It's got a nice, subtle background, so nothing to interrupt things, good lighting and so forth. But you can set your home studio up somewhat this way. The challenge is a lot of times when teachers are teaching, what they'll do is here's mistake number one, and this is modeled by my friend Beth Rogowski. And notice that Beth's face is, she's like, only her head is visible on camera. So you can't see her hands, which are a powerful teaching tool. Also notice the glare on her glasses. Glare is not necessarily bad. I'm looking now at mine. I don't think I have glare, so that's a good thing. Sometimes if you adjust up or down the lighting in your room, it can get rid of glare if you do have glare on your glasses. But so it's a problem is that Beth is too close to the camera. You can't see her hands. A good thing, though, that I like is that this is an image taken during COVID. And so she had sort of a logo of her university there. And students commented that they really liked that. So now I'll show myself how not to do another thing. So notice what I've done in this, and this is what people can often do. So if you look, you'll see that my face is kind of in the middle of the screen. We often think that the eyes in the middle of the screen is the best thing possible. But when you do that, notice how much wasted space above me, and this means that you cannot see my hands, or maybe the bare edge of my hands. But hands are really important. And all you needed to do was just move that camera down a little bit. And then you can see that, not only my face, but also my hands. So another thing that you can see, Beth is underexposed. She doesn't have enough lighting. I am overexposed, too much lighting. Sometimes when you are lit from the front with window light from the sun, it can cast a kind of a bluish look. So take pictures of yourself on a screencast and kind of look at what's the image if you have a typical place where you teach from online, and just get a sense. Whatever you do, make sure you don't have the light in back of you. You've probably seen colleagues who sometimes do that, and then you're cast as a silhouette. You can't see the expression of the person. So here's my colleague, Terry Sanowski. He's modeling for us how to do things properly. So he's nicely situated as far as where his head is on the camera. It's moved up, and then his hands actually he could be holding them low off camera, but he knows enough to lift them up so that you can easily see his hands when he is trying to make a point. So it's a very good thing. Now, one important idea is I am conveying this information to you. And oh, one thing I should say. So here's what I tend to do, and what many people tend to do. You're all perfect. You're perfect on the camera, and then you're teaching over a couple of hours, and then you start doing something like this. And so you drop off the camera. So just one thing you want to always make yourself a habit of doing is check where you are on the camera to try to make sure that you're appropriately positioned. Because no matter how good you are, the camera can sometimes move, you will move, and so forth. And it's just always a good idea to keep checking. So I can tell you this, but your face on the camera and how you're positioned is a habit. So I was lucky enough to be able to share about how the brain learns the other day. You have actually two systems by which you lay neural links of learning in your brain. One is through the declarative system of the hippocampus, and the second is through that procedural system. So the procedural system, those links are things you do without even thinking about it. So you drive home enough times, ride your bicycle along a path a certain number of times. After a while, you don't even think about how to get home. You're just so used to it that you can even drive right by a store that you wanted to stop by, but you're just so used to it, you didn't even think to stop at the store like you had planned to do. It is like that for online teaching. You can get yourself all properly positioned, and you know it. You want to make sure your head is up on the upper part of the camera, but before you know it, you can find yourself right back where you used to be. Because, well, I have a friend, Angela, we'll call her, and I mentioned to her, you need to be positioned like this, but she was used to positioning herself closely. So even though she knew what she was supposed to be doing, she was supposed to be sitting back from the camera, she would still, when she would position herself, she would automatically get really close to the camera because she was so used to it. So make yourself a little note. If that's your problem, push yourself back from the camera. Show your hands. Make sure your head is properly positioned. When you do it enough times, it will become a habit for you, and it will really help your students. So one sort of helpful hint for you is just how you look on camera is not the same as how you feel on camera. So if you're on camera, you may have a terrible headache, or you may be like super nervous because it's not your class. It's this thing that's like this eyeball that's looking at you, and it's recording. And so whatever is happening is something that could be there for infinity, right? And thousands of people could see you making whatever mistake you make. The thing is, whatever you're feeling inside, people cannot see that. So if you just fake it, right, and give yourself with your, usual, even if inside you're going, I'm dying here, it actually can work very well. Some of my videos that I had terrible migraine headaches, people will come up and say, you were so, that particular video, you were just so happy and friendly. And I'm like, well, that was a surprise because that's not how I felt. When you're in pain or nervous or whatever, just remember how you're feeling inside is not necessarily what people are seeing. So the one little bit of advice I can give is when we are face-to-face in classes, sometimes, especially if we come from that old school kind of Soviet traditional approach to teaching, where we're really serious about whatever we're trying to convey, we're serious about it, and so we do this thing because we really, it's important what we're trying to teach, and that can work in class. But online, what that comes across as is not, oh, I'm really serious about this. It comes across as, I hate you. So you want to, as much as possible, try to avoid frowning and being serious in that sense, because it can come across in a way that's not really intended. If you look at some of my videos, occasionally look really fast and you'll see little micro expressions. So what you'll see me doing are things like this. I'll be going, well, oh, and I'll have this little frown, and then it quickly changes into a, something more uplifting. But that's what you want to try to do, to try to be more uplifting, not really firm in how you're teaching. Or, I mean, you want to be very assertive, but you also want to be joyful in whatever you're sharing, because you're trying to bring them on board with you, instead of kind of punish them. So sometimes people get really nervous in front of a camera, and part of that happens like this. When you are nervous, you are actually thinking about yourself and not about the audience. It's a kind of a funny thing, but you can have this internal focus, and it is that declarative system that is thinking only about you and how you feel, and that you feel nervous. And this declarative kind of thinking about yourself is part of what causes the nervousness. So what you want to do is external focus. Focus on the camera, focus on your students. And what you'll find is that will activate that completely different procedural system. And that can help you just habitually begin teaching or continue your teaching without being so nervous about whatever you're teaching. One thing that I do, if cameras make you nervous, sometimes people will put like a little fluffy doll or a rubber duck or something like that right above the camera. And that can just make it feel like, yeah, you're talking to your little friend instead of you're talking to this weird kind of object. And that can be very helpful. So another thing that can be very helpful is just your breathing. So when I first began filming, I was really quite a nervous wreck, as my husband would attest. And what I was doing was I was breathing. So what you want to be doing is breathing deeply. So you're actually drawing air all the way down into your belly. So notice here you can see into your belly, that's where that air is going. But if you're nervous, you often can, unfortunately, breathe only shallowly. So here you see deep breathing is being modeled right here. But when you're nervous, again, what can happen is very, very shallow breathing. So let's see if that comes up here. Where's my shallow breathing? Should come up on the screen. We'll try this again. Oops, no, go back and okay. So notice here, there's the belly, and breath is going all the way to the belly. And now it's only, let's see, it's only going, let's see, where's my, so I'm going to show, I hope my little camera shows here, my arrow. When you're breathing, there we go. There's shallow breathing, only at the top of your diaphragm. And this is what happens when you're really nervous, because what is happening, there's fight, flight, or freeze are the ways that we can react when we're really nervous. And freeze means that you don't even draw air deeply down into your chest, because when you do, you're moving things. If you breathe very shallowly, you're not moving at all, and predators are less likely to detect you. So people tend to breathe shallowly when they're nervous, and they don't get enough oxygen in, and then their brain starts screaming, I'm super nervous. And you think it's because of the camera or because of the audience, when it's actually simply that you're not getting enough air in. So a good thing is, like right before you go on camera, take several deep breaths. And those deep breaths will help keep you oxygenated so that you don't get nervous and you're not starting to do this thing where you don't have enough oxygen and your voice gets a little bit squeaky. So sometimes people ask me what to do with their hands if they happen to be being shown full body, as with my friend here, Veronica Mila. And I have what I call the pocket theory of what to do with your hands, or whether or not people are nervous with their hands. And what the pocket theory is that in essence, if you're from a colder climate, you get used to putting your hands in your pockets when it's cold outside. And then when you get nervous, you also start getting used to putting your hands in your pockets. So you are a little less used to what to do with your hands when you're on camera. So I usually find that people who are from warmer climates, they generally have no problems. You do not need to advise an Italian, for example, on what to do with their hands when they're going on camera. But for those who are from northern climates, they often can not know what to do with their hands. Sometimes I say, don't worry so much about your hands. Worry about your elbows, because people often, when they're nervous, they'll put their elbows close to their bodies, and then there's not much for their hands to be able to do. So I have a friend who teaches kind of like this. So you want to lift out those elbows, as you will see Veronica doing here, and then that can help you to be more outgoing with your gesticulations. So let's watch what Veronica is doing. She's teaching in the Spanish version of Learning How to Learn for Youth.
¿Qué haces cuando no puedes resolver algo? Para los robots es muy fácil. Simplemente siguen estrellando sus cabezas contra el muro. Pero nuestros cerebros son mucho más complejos. Resulta ser que, si entiendes un poco sobre cómo funciona tu cerebro, puedes aprender más fácilmente y sentirte menos frustrado.
So she's making great and effective use of her hands. It's fantastic. And the more you can do that, and the more you can be sitting in such a situation that you can use your hands and have your students see your hands, the better it is for your students. So I just wanted to show a little bit, like this is a typical screen. It's probably, or setup. It may be something like what you might have. It's a good setup in that it's got two big screens. Notice the lights. People will have different kinds of lights. These are adjustable. So it works pretty well. The window is in front of me, not behind me. So I can put the PowerPoint on one side, and then on the other side, I can put it in presenter view, or have whatever the imagery of looking at my class. When it comes to lighting, it can be very important to always try to make sure the light is in front of you. Sometimes you will be traveling and it can be really a problematic thing but if you're at your usual place where you record, you at the very least want to have at least one light that's right in front of you. So that's what you can see right here is a main key light that's set up so that the computer is between you and the key light. So if it's a really bright day and you're actually using outdoor light, sometimes that's perfectly adequate for what you're trying to do. Now, sometimes it can be a very good thing if you can have one light that's a little stronger from one angle and a little bit lesser from another angle, both in front of you. So we can see that right here. So we've got our main key light, a little bit lesser of a fill light, and here's your computer. If you're really fancy, you'll have a little bit of a backlight, and that just kind of keeps the back from being in the shadows and so forth, although maybe you want that. Then there is, if you have a green screen that you are filming in front of, because if you do film with a green screen, as you're seeing, you can actually kind of do some special effects with your body. You don't need to, but if you do anything with a green screen, you generally want to have a light on that green screen to help eliminate the shadow that you cast against that green screen. So sometimes you want one or several lights on that green screen to help prevent that shadow from emerging. One thing that people often don't consider is the importance of voice. And I think sometimes they don't consider it because it's really hard to change. There are some people who have a very grating voice, and it can be even worse when you have that voice projected online. So people just don't want to listen to a screeching voice over, over a microphone and so forth. I have a friend who does online teaching quite a bit, and finally, she asked me, what can I do to increase or improve my teaching online? And I said, well, actually, it's your voice. Your voice could really, it's very grating in how it is. It kind of goes up and it's really sharp. And she was really taken aback. And I thought, oh, I shouldn't have said anything. Well, she went home to her family and she mentioned to them, Barb said, I should work on my voice. And they said to her, finally, someone has told you about your voice. So just keep in mind, music teachers, voice coaches are there for a reason. And oftentimes, politicians will hire these individuals to help coach them to have a voice that people really like to listen to. Women can have a little bit more challenge in this area. And the reason for that is that their voices are naturally a little bit higher. And that means that they can more easily go into the shrill registers, which our brains associate, for example, with a little child screaming, which it just makes us uncomfortable. So actually, some very great female politicians have used voice coaches to help them become just a little bit more mellifluous. So if you think that could be a problem for you, you may want to look into something like this. This is actually a wonderful article, The Science Behind Hating Someone for Their Voice. And really, we react when we hear that grating little sound and we don't like it. So if you sense that you might have a challenge of that nature, you may want to see about getting a voice coach. Another thing is, when you get in front of a camera, or teaching for the first time for that matter, you become nervous And when you become nervous, your vocal cords tighten. So whatever the register, your normal voice is, when you go on camera, you may sound kind of like this. And then that leaves you no room to go up higher to emphasize something, for example. So sometimes when I'm coaching someone, or my husband and I will be coaching someone, we'll say, go back to your normal tones, because they'll go an octave higher when they're first beginning to speak for the camera. So keep in mind, normal, if you're starting to creep up there, you have no room left to emphasize things and to be more like your usual self. Also, of course, there's a lot about the different kinds of microphones that you can be using, whether you're teaching, live or synchronously or asynchronously. Keep in mind the kind of microphone that you might be using. I once had a great cardiac sort of surround sound microphone, and I was recording the most exciting, best lecture I've ever given on Poisson's equation. I was so proud of myself, and I went and listened to it, and you could hear my husband snoring on the other end of, through the background. So it was not as exciting, apparently, as I had thought it was. But also, my microphone was so sensitive that it was picking up sounds that I didn't intend to be having it to pick up. So, of course, headset microphones can also be very helpful. One thing to just, if we're stepping back and we're looking at theory, sort of the master of all multimedia theory that is related at the heart of teaching online is Richard Meyer's theories. So he has a great body of work sort of setting out the different elements of what makes for good online learning. So it's a lot of the kinds of things that I've been subliminally trying to talk about, or that I demonstrated through how not to do it in that very first video. But he says things that are so simple and so obvious that you can forget how important they are. Like, words and pictures are better than just words alone. You should bring your material on gradually, get rid of extraneous on-screen material, and summarize and explain the material with prompts if you can. Speak clearly and enthusiastically. So that's what our demonstrator, Mr. Oakley, illustrated as far as what not to do. And notice he says on-screen agents should display human-like gestures and movements. So it's a little tough for me sometimes, like right now in this circumstance where I am teaching live, to know which way to point when I'm looking, let's see, I'd have to go and look. Let's see, it's below. So I have to point like this to point to what's on the screen. So, but when you're teaching something asynchronously, you can often point to the left or point to the right. And my husband was demonstrating, he looked like a post and said, as you can see in up to the right, or as you can see on the right, but he didn't make a hand movement. He just stared at the camera as he said, as you can see on the left, on the right. Mostly when you're teaching asynchronously, you can make a video where you can actually say as you can see on the right, or as you can see on the left. So try to not just be a post and as you're talking about something. I mean, use your hands to make it more lively. And the instructor shifts eye gaze between the audience and the board. So if I am again, this is easier to do when you are asynchronous. When I'm pointing to something, I will point like this to what I'm doing. And if I'm on green screen, I can be pointing to something, and then I look back at the camera. So here's what I have seen happen. If I script something, and in the script, it says point right. So what can happen sometimes is people will read the script from the teleprompter and they will go, as you can see here, point right. and they're supposed to be pointing right. But then they'll say, as you can see here, there's this, and they'll point right, but they won't look at what they're pointing at. So it is the funniest thing. It's so bad. So when you are looking at something that you're trying to show, actually try to look at it and then look back at the camera. We're going to talk about the use of teleprompters, the possible use of teleprompters in just a few minutes. But if you're using a teleprompter, you really, that's one of the toughest times when you're filming, is actually you're filming, your eyes have to jump away from the camera as you're pointing and looking at what you're pointing at. And then when your gaze comes back, you have to still land where the teleprompter is. And by golly, that's usually where people mess up. And so if you are in that circumstance where you have something on screen with, there's some wonderful, like nice little teleprompter sort of things that you can put on your screen. If you are looking on screen and you have to look and point and then look back and you mess up, just know that that's pretty common for people to do. So then that pretty much gives the overview of many of Richard Meyer's theories that are important for us. And again, a lot of them are very obvious when you see them, except the challenge is that people often forget to do them. So keep those ideas in mind. We're often told to make our videos very short, so about 6 minutes in length. So if we have, what this means, it just makes me laugh sometimes. So people will make a 60-minute video, and then what they'll do is they'll take it and they'll put it and like chop it up into 10 6-minute pieces. And then they think, well, I'm doing just what they told me to do, to make 6-minute videos. And that's not how the brain works. The brain works with concepts that you are teaching. If you break up your teaching in the middle of a concept, it actually makes it harder for a student to figure out what that concept is. So indeed, there is good research, Lagerstrom is my favorite, that shows that it really doesn't matter. You don't have to stick with 6 minutes. The reason they had initially thought 6 minutes was the magic rule was just because people would get up after 6 minutes and maybe go get a drink of water or something, but then they come back. So actually, you're perfectly fine to go, 50. I mean, I like shorter videos, and if the concept lends itself to a shorter video, perfect. But if you need to go 8 minutes, 12 minutes, even 20 minutes for that particular concept, it can still work just fine. So when I say a concept, that we're teaching a concept and you can't like cut that in the middle of the concept as you're conveying it, what am I really talking about? I'm talking about when we understand something, we're actually getting like information from events that are occurring in the outside world. And those events are helping us form our temporary mental models that we are holding in our working memory. So here you see events being formed, or events coming and forming our mental models. And that is, that is what students are doing whenever we're teaching anything. What do I really mean by an event? it can be something you're seeing, hearing, touching, or smelling, or tasting, or whatever. It can be a scene in a movie. It can be a key idea that you're teaching, like a concept. So all that key idea that you're trying to teach is helping them to form the mental model. And if you cut the video right in the middle of them trying to form that mental model, it can make it really, really difficult for them to form the mental model. So if, in essence, we think of it as events or key concepts or the key idea you're trying to convey, they have event boundaries, just like scenes in a movie have event boundaries. So, in fact, a lot of the work done on events and developing our understanding of mental models came from movie making and understanding the neuroscience of movie making. We have an event boundary at the beginning. We have the event, which may be the key concept, and then we have some kind of event boundary at the end. We often box off the key concepts we're trying to teach in such a way that we do it so naturally that we don't even kind of think about how we're moving from one topic to another topic, one key concept to another key concept. But in our teaching, we're often, presenting these events or these key concepts. We close it, we maybe do an active exercise, and then we have a new idea, a new event. We close it maybe with an active exercise. It's really the one challenge with teaching so I'm teaching synchronously now, but you will be watching it asynchronously later. So this means that I don't have the opportunity for us to do active sessions together now, which is one of the drawbacks of online teaching. However, you can replay me over and over again. So that's one of the good things of this kind of asynchronous, synchronous sort of teaching. So as you're creating your classes, you're often kind of dividing things up with key concepts that you are trying to teach. And those are, you may have a number of key concepts are within a video, just as within this big video, you have a number of key concepts. So one thing I really like about YouTube, for example, is that you can go to YouTube and you can have a video that's there, and then you can break it up and actually kind of have it so that people can skip to different key concepts that might be within that YouTube video. So, since we are teaching different events, let us move to a new event. And this event is talking about the importance of motion in your teaching online. Now, there's a concept called the tyranny of film. And what this relates to is that when something moves, your attention is drawn to it automatically. It turns out that our attention goes on something from two different ways. One is what they call top-down processing. That's when you turn your attention to something and you're deliberately and forcefully making yourself do it. The other is bottom-up processing. And that's like when your attention goes on something, whether or not you want it to go on that something. And so for an example, let's say that your teacher is teaching, so you turn your attention to the teacher. Okay, that's top-down processing. Suddenly, you hear a giant explosion sound just outside the door. Everyone in the classroom will turn to look at that explosion sound, and that is bottom-up processing. That sound is drawing their attention whether or not they want it. As it turns out, often motion is what will draw our attention, whether we like it or not. So they call this the tyranny of film, but I like to call it the allure of movement. Our eyes just tend to naturally, like if we see something moving, that's why, if somebody gets up and walks in or walks out of a lecture, or if, let's say, if the teacher is standing and moving and their hands are moving, that's pretty predictable and it's not big motion. But if the teacher gets up and jumps on the desk, you would suddenly look at that movement. You couldn't help but look at that movement. And you may say to yourself, well, that's fine for teachers who can jump on desks, but I'm not that kind of teacher. But here is the beauty of online. You can do things online that you can't really do face to face, and it can attract attention. So let me give you a little sense. I'm going to show a little bit of video here. And this video is going to give you a sense. This is me filming in my basement and so it's going to give you a little sense of the kinds of things you can do online. How do green screens work? Well, I just stand in front of it like this. I just stand for green screen. Crop using a video editing program to get rid of the stuff on the edges. Then we stick whatever background we want behind me, just like the weather person at your local TV station. I can be in the jungle or in the city. We can even just stick in an animation from PowerPoint. Notice the infinite effect that we simulated by just draping the cloth gently forward. You might be surprised to learn that even top-notch MOOC-making facilities that I've toured around the world often don't have a full-length green screen. Why might a full-length green screen be important? Because from an evolutionary perspective, things that suddenly loom closer to you were more likely to kill you. So motion that appears to jump closer, as when you go from full body to half body on video, activates all sorts of neural attentional layers. Motion of all types, especially unexpected motion, really attracts attention. So I think one thing about this is, let's just go back here for a second if I can. How do green screens work? Okay, so that's making an important point, but I'd like to make another side point while we're here. So I'm looking at this, I'm going, my hair actually looked not too bad. But if you look at my pants, don't my pants look kind of baggy? I'm like, oh, look at this. This is what you will do when you see yourself online. You'll pick at little things that you think are wrong. So this is so common. And so, it's everybody does it. So when you do it and you think, oh, I'm just worse than everybody else. No, you're not. You're just like everybody else. And if you really carefully start watching newscasters and things, you will find them doing some of the same mistakes that you're catching yourself doing. So it's very typical to be overly critical of yourself when you're online, and just try not to worry too much about it. So there's something that I like to call the predictability principle. And that is that if you have too much static, like things staying the same, if you'll notice that a lot of times people will, they'll have pictures, but they won't have movement in whatever they're showing online. So if you have these static visuals, people get bored. Remember, there's nothing to attract attention. So visual change is what attracts that bottom-up attention. So if you can keep that in mind, and keep that tyranny of film, the allure of motion in mind, that can help you to create better synchronous or asynchronous kinds of, and even asynchronous, or both synchronous and asynchronous kinds of videos. It's not that everything needs to be motion. It's an art. At least at this point, it's not an algorithm. So just keep in mind things like this. You may be standing and you've got bullet points beside you. don't always have the bullet points on one side. You can shift things around a little bit. You can, even if you're half body, shift things around a little bit. And keep in mind that value of looming motion. Sometimes, here's an interesting trick. So a friend of mine, he's the 5-time US memory champion. And what he likes to do is he starts by, he does this. He goes, okay, there's no one here. What's going on? Okay. Oh, he sits down. So you have an empty chair, and then you come and sit in the chair. So he adds this dynamic motion right at the very beginning of his video that's quite different than how other people start their videos. So a lot of his videos are shot in half body, but he will edit to have it so that when he's trying to emphasize a point, he appears to jump closer. And this really keeps your visual interest in whatever he's teaching about. So you can also build in, if you're using green screen, interaction with the medium. So you can point or duck or, gasp, all sorts of things like that, instead of just standing like a post. Just be careful. Video editing, good video editing is incredibly valuable. It can make you or break you. So I sometimes will say things like, well, let's say that you are a video editor for a university and you've been doing videos for them for a long time. And you've done things like they come to you and they say, produce this 40-hour course on manufacturing processes. So you do. But what you get used to is you're pumping out product, not quality product, just product. So this means that if you have a university-trained video editor, they're often very used to giving you quantity, but not high quality, because they simply have not had time to create high quality. So sometimes it can be better to actually reach outside of universities for video editing, because you can find video editors that are really more keen on good high quality video editing. But what is happening now, particularly with AI and the advances in AI, is that you can easily do video editing. So maybe not the fancy stuff, but you can actually do really simple video editing that greatly enhances your students' experience. So try to play a little bit with that. Certainly, I've found that my own little video editing makes a huge difference. I can take 5 minutes to edit something and send it to a conference, and they're like, oh, this is the best I've ever gotten, and it's like, it's 5 minutes of video editing. And I like to use a program called Camtasia, which is simple to use. If you're using something like Adobe Premiere Pro, it is not simple to use. So keep that for the experts. Visuals, good visuals are really important in whatever you're teaching online. And I was very lucky. My visual sort of artist who was helping me in learning how to learn was Kevin Mendez. He did a great job. But he was motivated because he is now our son-in-law. So I think that's part of why he did such a great job, except he is a really good artist. There are genius artists in every university. Remember that the brain is highly visual. And I mean, like you can see here, a big part of the brain is oriented towards visual processing. So the more we can meet that need, for the vast majority of students, it will be very, very helpful for them. So, I try to get moving images, like I use Wikipedia because you can often get images that are really easy to, that are, you don't have to worry about copyright so much. And I sometimes will get my friends to create videos. I like to, or I'll create videos myself. And I like to use something called story blocks, which I've found to be a very good video editing program. Of course, you can draw on side pads, so there's excellent like Wacom tablet and so forth that you can draw on if you are writing equations out and that sort of thing. You can also use an anti-fouling glove that will help you from kind of getting weird things happening. So there's plenty of sources of imagery and music and so forth. So I think we are, let's see, we're getting very close to, one thing to just be aware of is that if it says, that it's fair use, whatever that image, that means you can't use it, or you probably shouldn't use it on something. So, but if it says public domain, then it's good. Just make sure you try to get something that's big enough that it's good. A little bit of humor in what you're teaching is, they used to say humor is bad. It's a seductive detail that detracts from learning. But nowadays, it's very evident that people may not learn better with humor, although they may, but they will select multimedia that does include humor. And it helps to give a little bit of a mental break. So I do have to show a little excerpt from our video. Let's see. And when I say humor, I don't mean you have to be funny all the time. I just mean an occasional use of humor. So this is an excerpt from our course on online teaching. And the person you will see beside me is actually David Joyner, who is the executive director of the world's largest master's program. It has over 10,000 students. It's Georgia Tech's computer science program. So why is it such an incredibly large master's program? It's online. And they've shown that the results from the online contingent versus the face-to-face are just the same, except that the online is a quarter the cost. If you had the choice of two different online courses, both good, but one of which had a little humor sprinkled here and there throughout, which would you choose? And which do you think most of today's typical learners would choose? So that's just a little bit there on from our course on teaching online. And actually, everything I presented here today is also there and far, far more. So I would encourage you to learn more, but I also greatly encourage you to be in the leaders of the country as far as really mastering the online environment and using that. For example, the University of Szeged in Hungary is now Hungary's #1 university. And part of that is because they really took to heart the idea of, yes, we're going to have a really good online program, because they realized that that is a fantastic way to have impact throughout the country and really help people learn. Remember, it is inevitable that epidemics are going to arise in the future. Wars are going to arise in the future. You want to harden the educational system of the country and try to make it so that you have some percentage of teaching must be given online. This is what Singapore did after the SARS epidemic. They realized that epidemics are going to happen, and so they made a certain percentage of all university education and some undergraduate or high school and so forth education had to be online to help harden the country for these inevitable challenges. So I would say for you that please, if you would, just take advantage of what's going on in the online world with online teaching. And I hope this has given you some great ideas to help you with your teaching. And I am happy to answer whatever questions I can.